Do 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 do.
Yeah,
Is
I'm
that a
trying
good
to figure out
start?
how to start this. Well, I try to start these episodes with a hook, right? That
Yeah.
like here's the promise of the episode, and I'm trying to figure out what that hook's going to be.
So now you know who is the most uncomfortable with silence. It's this girl.
This girl. We're talking about really, I mean, how to get better at asking for what you want, which I guess goes down into like how to get what you want. But to me, there's a couple different aspects of this. It's like, how do you get an answer to a question? How do you reach out to somebody respectfully who you admire? And how do you make like good things happen in your life? And it comes down to usually doing a little bit of background work yourself to figure out what the actual question is you're asking, and then identifying any gaps in your knowledge, and then following some combination of going to where the answer is or who has the right answer for you, like figuring that out first, and then actually asking them a good question. So I'll lead this off with a story. And then I asked Gwen and Amber to prepare some stuff for this too. And then I've a couple examples as well. I have a friend, his name's Jim Shields, who wrote a book called Family Board Meeting, 18 Summers, talks a lot about entrepreneurial families and how to be really close with your kids. And they do a lot of homeschooling with their kids. And so he tells this story one time where him and his family, they have 5 kids together, him and his wife were at a Walmart in like the middle of nowhere. And there was a homeless person outside of the Walmart, and the homeless person had a sign that asked for money, but he didn't ask for money specifically. He said, I need a sleeping bag. And Jim and his family went in and they bought a blanket and gave it to this person. And if you think about what just happened there, it's actually quite brilliant. Instead of this person asking for money wherever they ask for money, and people's minds go into all of these places, I don't want to support their habits, whatever, which I don't necessarily agree with. I like, oh, they're going to buy cigarettes. It's like, well, they're hungry, and maybe the only way to like curb their appetite is smoking. Oh, I don't want them to buy alcohol. It's like, oh, maybe they're cold, and this is the only way to like feel warm. So like, there's a lot more to this story, but a lot of the times when people don't get money, it's like, oh, they think these things, right? So this person went to a place where sleeping bags existed, waited out front, and asked specifically for what he needed. And very quickly, somebody gave him exactly what he needed. Think about how much longer that would have taken if he just asked for change outside of the Walmart, for example. That's a good example of asking for what you want, going where you want. When Amber, which one of you guys wants to start?
I actually did that exact thing with a family sitting
somebody
in front
bought you
of
a sleeping bag.
No, I bought.
Okay, all right. Shit, I was like, damn, man, is it getting that rough? Like,
there was this really rough time in my life, and no,
I'll send you some couple of dollars, homie. I don't want you.
I know, right?
Should be outside in front of Walmart, dude. That's rough. You mean philosophically you actually did this for?
I did the buying.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
there was a guy and his family on the corner, and they needed their gas tank filled up. Like they were down for a job. Like where I live, we have a lot of people that come for seasonal work, and they needed their gas tank filled up and snacks for their kids. And so went and filled up his gas tank, went inside and got snacks and drinks for the kids, and that was it. But it was specific. It was, we need this because we're visiting, we're trying to make our way home. And so kind of very similar stories. I did that earlier this summer. But that's why, is because it was specific. I did know what was happening. It took out the guesswork of what was going on.
It makes it much easier. It makes it more comfortable for the person who's helping. And it also makes it much easier to like, I don't know, kind of work your way up a little bit. Like, again, I mean, if you ask for change, somebody might give you change. They might not. A lot of people don't have change these days. But if you ask for something specific as a sleeping bag, it might be a couple $100, but like a lot of people might buy that for you going in. It's Walmart. It's probably like $40, but whatever the cost of the thing is. And there's a lot of iterations of this. There's a lot of like, this is not about asking for a sleeping bag. Obviously, I hope that you can kind of hear that. This is more about not going into a Facebook group and saying, hey, what are you all doing to get clients? I need clients. Yes. Because you're just not going to get any good information. You're just going to get a whole bunch of people and be like, bleh, and then you're going to get hit up by like 75 different mentors who are going to promise you that they're going to help you. And you're not going to have your problem solved. And so what's a better way?
I'm laughing because this is literally what Amber and I were saying for probably the entire time we were here before you showed up. This is the exact conversation we were having. I need help with marketing my business. Bro, like, what's the business? What's not working? What have you tried? Like, here's something that I just thought of as you were talking, Jonathan, because normally I drift off when you talk. But I don't want to hear what you guys say, obviously. I've read the books already, so I know what you're going to say. But here's what I thought of you as you were talking. Confused transactions have a low rate of follow through, right? You don't convert very many confused transactions. Asking for money is a confused transaction because people are left to their own devices about what you want to do with the money. We see this reflected in sales, right? Because we will vaguely ask for a sale and then people don't get it. This is what happens to the generalist on social media or online building an online course. Your client base is so confused about what you might be doing. And sure, they know it's fitness, but they're so confused about what you might be doing that it's too confusing to follow through on the transaction. They don't know exactly what the questions are. They don't know exactly what the information is. Every time you try to transact from human to human, and there's an air of vagueness to it, you haven't said exactly what you mean or asked for exactly what you want or explain exactly what you do, the likelihood of that transaction going through is minimal. You can change your ability to convert just by being very specific about the parameters of whatever the transaction is. And a lot of people fail at that. Like you said, anytime somebody asks for money, you leave it to it's left to the other person's imagination what you may do with it. And they will quickly make up a scenario that they don't agree with to get out of it, right? If you say, I need a sleeping bag, well, then they know exactly what's going to happen. Like, who doesn't love a sleeping bag, right? Shit, a sleeping bag, buddy? Hell yeah, we'll go in there and get you a sleeping bag. Good for you, buddy. I hope you stay warm tonight, right? Versus, can I have some, the worst way to do this is, please, anything will help. Bro, nobody's helping you on the corner with the anything can help. So anything would help.
What's an example then? What's an example that you've seen with this?
Oh, our students, absolutely. Like, I have conversations all the time when I say students, for those that aren't aware, I'm talking about the Online Trainer Academy students. But our students asking things like, Amber and I just talked about this. I'm having trouble retaining, how can I retain clients? Right? Okay. So what's your client base? Like who are the clients and what do they do? Are they busy? Are they tech nomads and they're hopping on and off of flights, going from country to country? Things aren't very systematic for them in their lives. Therefore, things fluctuate all the time and you're not in tune with that. And that's why they're coming and going. Are they busy moms who are single, who don't have great systems? Like,
so what's a better process for this person?
The better process
to get better help.
Deliver the information up front that someone needs to answer the question. First of all, a lot of these questions come from a hypothetical space. That's why the questions are so shitty. Let's just start there. You haven't done anything. You don't have any real experience with the thing that you're about to ask about. And the question is another way to practically procrastinate against taking action. So first, take some action. You'll get much better questions. But second, approach the question with the information that the person needs to answer it. Okay, here's what's going on, John. I'm working with moms
up front to say, if I'm going to get a good answer here, these are the 3 things that this person needs to know
Needs to
about
know.
the situation.
They need to know. When I'm asking for people to be on live broadcast in my free group on Facebook, I approach them and I say, number one, I've got a free Facebook group. It's packed full of people in your demographic. Nothing but moms over 30. And I know you just did a recipe book for summer vacation snacks. Number two, what I'm trying to do in this group is empower them to have a better time this summer with their children. And number three, I'm willing to do all the work of the marketing of the live broadcast. I'm willing to do the work of setting up the questions. I'm going to give you a recording that you can use for your own social media. Number four, I'd love it if you have some time in between now and the end of the summer to come do a live broadcast with me. I've sent you a link of all the possible times. Feel free to check. Versus, hey, would you like to do a live broadcast with me? About what? For who? When? How? Right? If you leave all this stuff out, that confused transaction has a minimal chance of going through to completion, because people, I don't want to say that. That's a sweeping generalization. Because if you don't do the work of empowering the person on the other side of the question to answer for you, you're overworking them. The exchange is uneven, right? Here, I've got a question. I'm going to make you do all the work of figuring out all the details of this vague question that I asked, and then I'm going to have you do the work of answering it for me. You ready? Let's go. Like, you're going to frustrate everybody that you ever ask a question.
I think a part of this too is to ask fewer questions and make your questions count more.
Yes.
Or I mean, maybe not ask fewer questions. I don't know if it's ask fewer questions, but make them count more and be more, do a little bit more background work as to who you're asking and why. So the summit that we're doing, we just finished an interview, right? Amber and I. And the people that I chose to speak align very much with the principles of the obvious choice principles. They're not just like, oh, this person is well known.
Right.
So I want to get them involved because they're well known, because of some way that their fame is going to transfer onto me. Which, I mean, I think could be legitimate. But, I mean, what's in it for them? Number one.
Right.
But number two, like, you have to be prepared with their work. I mean, basically everybody who I've spoken to so far, like, I went out and bought and read their book at a minimum before I spoke to them, and have come prepared with stories and things I wanted to know more about, at least to lead into the conversation. I mean, before you ask somebody a question, go out and read their book. Like, if it's somebody that has written a book. I mean, there's an author out there that I think is really funny. He always posts these screenshots of people who ask him questions. Hey man, just bought your book. Have a quick question. How about this? And his answer is always, read the book.
Painful.
Like read the book. And I get that too. I mean, I don't respond with read the book, but I get that a fair bit too, of people who ask me all these questions. I'm like, for $10, $15, you can buy my book that has a full answer of this. And a part of me really believes that if you're not willing to spend $15, it's not worth my time answering it to you. What I say now, so I'll often answer in Reddit. So in Reddit, they're not specifically asking me, right? But if they ask me questions, how I'll often respond is, I can't really answer you that well in a message right now. Like, there's only so much that I can do here, right? Fortunately, I've already answered this in a lot of detail in this book. Look, it's on Amazon. Here's the link. If you really can't afford to buy it, please let me know. I'll send you a copy. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's just, I don't want to repeat myself. So that's how I answer that. But I really like when somebody says, hey man, I read your book. I was really interested in this part about this thing. There's one aspect of it because of this situation I'm having that I have a question about. Hell yeah. I get something like that once every 5 months. Like, that's how often that happens. And you see it, Amber. Like, these people I'm talking to, they're just like, how did you, like what? I was like, because I listened to one podcast with you. Like, that's how I knew that story. Like, before I interview somebody, I'm going to listen to a few podcasts with you, and I'm going to, at minimum, read your book. I'm going to Google as many articles and look through them as I can.
Yes.
And it's like, people are so surprised when I'll ask them something that's personal to them. These are not like hard to find facts. Mm-hmm. But to me, it shows a level of respect. And I think that level of respect is very much missing in a lot of places kind of today. What were you going to say, Howard?
I actually reached out several months ago to an author, Jay Baer. He wrote Talk Triggers. And, you know,
I've heard the name. I don't think I've ever read his work. Do you like his stuff?
I do. You know, it's not like firsthand research or anything like that, but I like his take on things.
Okay.
And the way it's written is very engaging. And so I'm super obsessed customer service, customer experience stuff. And so I had reached out after I finished reading the book and told him, like, hey, super loved the book, especially, you know, this part, you know, impacted me in this way. You know, I'm super passionate about this and I want to learn how to stay on top of new research. Do you have a suggestion of one or two places that will help me stay on top of it? You know, super appreciate it, you know. And he responded back, you know, within a couple of weeks and gave me a few ideas, and he was super sweet about it.
I mean, I send a lot of messages to authors. Mm-hmm. I think partly because, I mean, it's something that I do a lot of, and I respect the game, and I respect how damn hard it is.
Right.
I'll often just send authors messages just thanking them for something that they did, 100%. Specifically on the impact that it had on me and why. Mm-hmm. And in almost every case, they get back and they're very thankful and grateful for it. I mean, just like a basic thank you. But what that also makes it easier is to then follow up if you do have a question or you want to involve them in something, right? It's not a guaranteed yes, but it's much easier that way if you kind of lead with that versus just like a thank you for your work. It really helped me. You know, I really love this one aspect of it for whatever reason. And it actually, you would be surprised at how little of that most authors and quote unquote thought leaders get. Mm-hmm. They get a lot of requests on their time by people just starting things. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm just starting a podcast. I'd love to have you as my first guest. I don't want to be your first guest. Mm-mm. You have no audience.
Get some reps in first.
You have no audience, and you're shit at interviewing. I don't know you, but you've never interviewed anybody before, so you're shit at interviewing. So not only is this not going to be a good representation of me because you're a shit interviewer,
right?
Also, you have no audience that's ever going to see this. You're leaning on me sending it to my audience. I don't want to send this to my audience because it's a shit representation of me.
Right.
So where am I benefiting from this, right? Versus putting in the work first and getting good. Yeah. Any more stories or anything like this?
Yes,
I could talk about what we're doing with some emails, but
absolutely. You know, when you talked about reading the book, right? If the person has a book,
yeah,
I think what people don't understand is that with the advent of social media, everybody has a book now. Everybody has a book. You just go to their social media. They've got paragraphs about their life, about their kids, about their work, about their passion, about their expertise, about everything. It's really not that difficult to do the work to the extent that you learn which questions to ask and how to phrase them.
And you don't even need to do this in advance. Like, before you talk to somebody or before you send their email, just click on their social media and go through their stories and go through their past 20 or 30 posts.
A minute
look
before.
for one or two things. Yeah.
5 minutes before you reach out to them. You know, and what you said about people who have written something that's significant that they care about, they are absolutely shocked when you reference it. Because that gets to your point, John, and Amber's point, most people don't even read it. Like they don't, you know, the first time that I had someone who I felt like was significant to my audience, I was able to have a live broadcast with her in my free group. It was Amanda Thebe, and she wrote the book Menopocalypse, right? I read the thing from cover to cover. And then I spent a week listening to it because she narrates her. No, she doesn't. But I spent a week listening to it as I was doing my own training sessions. And several times during the interview, she would say, "Oh, you actually read the book, didn't you?" Like, yes, Amanda. It's a great book. And
but they're surprised.
Right. And
I've been interviewed on hundreds of podcasts now, easily over 100, probably more. And the minute that somebody starts it with, "So tell me, I mean, what's your story? You know, how did you get to where you are today?" I just go into this automatic mode of like, get me out of here, 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 get me out of here. Because they've done no work. They have the same 8 questions they run through. And it's the same thing over and over and over again.
That would trigger instant rage for me. Like I am happy to help with hard things, or if I could tell you've tried, but when it's like that blatantly stupid, you should ask Abigail and Alex when they were still here in Misty. When something that bad happens, I go off. It just instant rage.
What was that? What did you like the question of the story that I started with Jason Amber today? We just before this I interviewed Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, and I've known him for a while, right? But there was something in his book. It was almost like an aside leading into a story, and so I was like, you and I have something in common. I don't know if you know this. He's like, "Oh, what's that?" I was like, "Both of us are reasonably short Jewish guys who are married to women who always thought that they would be married to taller men."
Nice.
He's like, we've never spoken about this before. How'd you know this? I was like, it was in the book. And it led into a story about goal setting and the problems of goal setting and constraints. So his story that he tells in the book is that he met his wife on a dating app and he reached out to her. She would have never have found him because she set the filters in the dating app to be people of a certain height. And how damaging that those constraints can be, just because we can set those filters. Yes. So there was like a reason and like a story and a good point to go into it. But that was like an aside on page, I don't even know, I've got his book behind me, like on page like 184 of his book. Right. But it's just a fun way to start a conversation.
Well,
something
not only
like that,
but what you get out of that is something that most people will never get out of a conversation with him, simply because you paid a little extra attention. And I want to speak to because we got a lot of coaches out there that have come through OTA that are they want to operate in a lot of, and I mean Online Trainer Academy, they want to operate in a lot of different media realms, right? And one of probably the most popular is podcasts, right? I remember, most of our first cohort OTA level 2, when it was called that, quite a few of them have like a podcast. I've been on a lot of them, right? Because they're colleagues and they're awesome people, obviously. Level 1, 2. And one of the worst experiences you can have as a person on the being interviewed side is for somebody to reach out and say, "Hey, man, I'd love to have you on the podcast." You say, "Okay, cool. Sounds good, man." And then they say, "What would you like to talk about?" That's so annoying. That is so terribly annoying. And I try to be a gracious human, and I want to help them figure it out, because I don't want I never want people to be subjected to their own lack of experience, right? So if I can give the lesson and be cordial about it and still do it, I'm happy to do that. Like, hey, you might want to do a little research in the future. I'll defile myself. I'll self-deprecating. I'm not a big shot. Like, I'm no Jonathan Goodman, so I don't mind. But in the future, man, if you're going to ask people, like, come to them with the topic, right? Know enough about them to know what the podcast should be about.
Yeah.
But if you're out doing
my
that,
favorite are those podcasts where they send me a 20 question form,
survey.
A sheet of what are all the, I do think it's respectful to ask somebody if you're interviewing them, like, hey, what would make this a win for you? Like, especially like, are you trying to promote something? Like, what kind of message are you trying to get out? Like, I'll often ask people if anything is off limits.
Yeah.
I'll often ask people that, especially people who I have a deeper personal relationship with.
Right.
Like Jason, I've known for a lot of years. We've had, and I didn't get into the stuff because it didn't really apply to the conversation, but I also don't think that he would particularly want to talk about it. He actually did bring up his time at Men's Health a little bit, but I know that his time with Men's Health was, not positive, but there were a lot of frustrations, and he's told me about a lot of them. For one example is that, none of this is like secret, but I don't think it would have been particularly respectful to bring it up with him, is that he, Men's Health, often, I haven't looked at it in years, but the goal of a magazine, the goal of anything you do, generally needs to serve your customer. Like, the goal of a magazine should serve your reader. But the problem with the monetization of Men's Health was that it was ad-based, and the ads were largely paid by the ads were largely bought by things like men's cologne companies and fashion companies. And so they actually had to run a lot of content about men's fashion and stuff like that, even though they knew the readers didn't care about it and didn't appreciate it, because that's what the ads were. And that's a serious problem. Fundamental problem. Where your money is coming from a place and you're stuck doing things because your money's coming from a certain place. And so, there were certain things that I think, but I don't think there's anything wrong with, saying, hey, is there anything off limits here in this conversation? At the same time, you shouldn't ask somebody to fill out a 20. If somebody sends me one of those forms, if it forces me to fill them out, I'll just write NA in it because I'm kind of like a jackass, and I'll just send them a message afterwards and just say, hey, I'm looking forward to doing the podcast with you, but I unfortunately I can't commit an hour to fill out this form. I'm not too mean with it. I'm not just like to do your research for you, but and if that's if that means that this won't work, then that's okay.
I get it.
But this all translates to working with customers and clients, though, right? Like, you have to understand who your customer client is. And you're not going to give them. Yes. Well, so like sending you work, right? So for example, if I was targeting C-suite level executives, if I send them a 5-page health history thing, they're going to fire me, right? And chances are they have someone that handles paperwork for them. Right. So I would probably want to ask, do you have a personal assistant or someone you would like me to copy this on that, helps you with that, with whatever, with your schedule or whatever. And I'm also probably not going to be asking for a weekly 1-hour coaching call because I'm guessing they're probably pretty effing busy. Or if I'm reaching out like in the DMs trying to get new leads or whatever, like I know Ren and I get it all the time where like they obviously didn't even look at our page and they're wanting to be a coach for us. Like, for one, it literally says on my profile what I do for a living. You obviously didn't even look.
What?
So like the skills to be able to ask a really good quality question is going to translate into your ability to get leads, to convert them into a client, and to coach them appropriately. If you cannot ask a quality question, all 3 of those stages are probably going to be exceptionally difficult for you.
So let me tell you a story of something that just happened. This is probably what we're going to end with because my throat is feeling horrible. But we have my mentorship, which Gwen, you and Amber know about. And this is, I mean, we call it like an advanced mentorship. You know, a minimum to apply is you got to be making either 1,000 online or 5,000 like in person. Basically, you've got to have been doing this thing for a little bit of time, and that's just we need some minimum amount to gauge that. But and if you aren't, then the Online Trainer Academy is the right choice for you right now to get up to that point. And if you are, you know, we'd love to talk to you about the mentorship, and you can send me a DM on Instagram that just says mentor at any point, and we'll talk to you about that. But I send out an email like once a month, inviting people for the mentorship to apply to it. And for a while, all of the emails basically said the same thing. They said, you know, minimum requirements, whatever, you're making 1,000 a month. And we get a lot of responses, and we get a lot of like largely unqualified responses because people just don't read too good, I think. So they're like, "Hey, I'm just starting out," you know, and so you know that happens. But Jason, who heads it up and operates the mentorship for me, had an idea a couple months ago. He's like, you know, we've had a few times where people have said to us, or they've applied and they said, you know, it took me a long time to apply because I didn't know whether this was right for me. You know, I'm already doing 20,000 a month, 30,000 a month, whatever it is. And like, we will work with people who are doing 20, 30,000 a month and get them to $80,000 to $100,000 a month. Like, we've done that multiple times. So we could absolutely work with people to scale up. Right? A minimum is one, but when you say your minimum is one, somebody who's doing 15,000 doesn't think it's for them.
Right.
And so we were getting people who still were a little bit earlier in their journey. So Jason had the idea. He said, you know, why don't we just, as an experiment 1 month, and this is like part of the lesson, is like experiment. Like, what's the worst can happen is it doesn't work as well. And then you learn something. So we said, as an experiment this month, let's send out, let's set the requirement to 10,000 a month for this email. All right. So the email went out and it said, it was a similar email to what we've sent in the past, but it said this month we're looking for 10 people because we'll change it depending on how much capacity we have. We offer like a lot of one-on-one support. So depending on the capacity, we might be looking for 5, 10, 15, 20 that month. And we're having a lot of people renew these days for like a year at a time. So we have less capacity kind of ongoing. But we sent out this email and it said, we're looking for people who are doing 10,000 a month to help them scale up. You know, could be gym owner, could be an online trainer, right? And we had a lot fewer responses than we've had in the past, which kind of makes sense. Like we set the guidelines to be more rigid, so we had fewer responses. But the responses that we had were way more qualified.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the kicker. Almost everybody who signed up with us that month signed up for an entire year upfront, as opposed to 12 weeks. Because when you, depending on where you're at, our student advisors who you chat with on the phone during the application process will kind of gauge what the right step. Like some people, it's like, we're going to build something big here, right? And also, unfortunately, we've worked with a lot of people who have just had bad experiences with other groups and stuff. And so in our industry and outside our industry. And so sometimes they're just not willing to commit to a year at the beginning. And so we usually won't offer 12 weeks or a year. We usually offer one or the other one, depending on where you're at. But sometimes there'll be a conversation about the two. Anyway, this email that went out that said the minimum was 10,000, we had fewer people respond, right? Which is like, oh no, fewer people responded. But the people who responded were much more serious, much more committed, almost in that they knew that they wanted it versus they were just like, yeah, I need help, right? Not to say that this doesn't happen with people making less than that, but just the ratio of it was more. And almost all of them signed up for a year at once. And what that means for us is that we can get into the real work with you sooner. Like if I don't know whether I'm going to be able to work with you on your business for 12 weeks or a year, I kind of need to prove and get you some quick wins earlier, which could, depending on your situation, not necessarily, but could actually delay the stuff that we really need to do to build the stability for the scale and the growth long term. Not necessarily, every situation's different. If I know that I got you for a year, we can have an honest conversation and be like, do you need some quick wins now? Yes, no. Okay, depending on that, here's how we're going to build out this plan with you. We can get into the real work sooner. So that's an example of the way that we made the ask not only identified different people from the same list that previously did not respond to something about that same program because they didn't think it was for them. And it also laid up the program to get more committed people. And so what we did the next time was, this was the most recent email that went out, is we said, okay, is there like a middle ground, right? So we set it and we said, minimum of 5,000 this time. And this was relatively recent, so we don't have the results of that yet. But from the people who have signed up for the mentorship in the last week, in the last 2 weeks, there's been more what we call legacy, like people who have signed up for a year at a time for sure, than I had normally seen in the months previous. And so we don't know the data on that yet. But my point with all of this is the way that you ask really makes a difference in helping people figure out whether something may or may not be right for them. And it might be the same program. But it's definitely important to think about and consider, and also just like try and see what comes back. I don't know how well the 5,000 minimum call to action for the mentorship is going to go yet. We'll see, and then we'll course correct as we go. Anything to add to that, guys, before I recommend another episode?
Just that
it's really interesting.
Stuff. Go ahead. Got to do stuff.
It's interesting to me because when you create an ad or an email where you're trying to ask for a sale, there's always going to be some kind of gap, right? In in information that has the reader adding to the story on their own.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me how that little change changes their internal narrative and how they perceive and fill in those gaps. And so I don't really have a point other than that's really interesting. And I like it.
So it used to be, back when I started this internet marketing thing, it used to be that open rates in emails, and like you could pretty reliably assume that if you send somebody a message, if you've already sent them a message about something, they will have opened and like probably at least scanned it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really assume that anymore. And so having stringy, so it used to be you could actually, like, I would tell stories across multiple emails in automations and broadcasts to people, and I would string together narratives, and I would create open loops and say, in the next email, I'm going to teach you how to whatever. You kind of can't do that anymore, which means that, to your point, Amber, you very much fall prey now to what somebody is already thinking in their own mind. Mm-hmm. Which I think just lends a little bit more credence to this concept more than anything else.
Yep.
Okay.
What you recommended?
My throat's pretty much completely gone, so I'm going to end it here. Yeah, Jaden's been sick. Jaden was throwing up today. He's been sick, and I think I'm getting it. I've also been talking a lot. I've been doing a lot of podcasts and interviews and calls with editors and all that kind of stuff. So, I think little Johnny Tim throat needs a break.
Little Johnny,
you need a nap Johnny, too. That was
Tim,
weird.
Tim throat. Yeah, sleep hasn't been good either. Anyway, I'm going to recommend one of my favorite episodes of all time that we've done on the podcast. It's episode 42. A little bit back. It's called 8 Non-Obvious Coaching Truths. This is really 8 non-obvious business truths, but it's things like the fallacy of passive income. It's things like productivity and how like the worst thing that you can do when you're trying to be more productive is add some productivity app or like figure out some way to make better lists. So people tell me they really love this one. I think this is one of the most important episodes that we've recorded as well. So you can just go back wherever you're listening to this and look for episode 42, 8 non-obvious coaching truths. And I hope that you love it. And thanks for hanging out with us as always. We'll talk again soon.
Bye-bye.